Do you guys want to talk about a topic you've never heard about before? Something that will blow your mind. A new technology called artificial intelligence. Ooh, what is it? What is it? Really excited to do this. I'm going to call up our panel. These are four actually, of the leaders in AI. Abridge definitely counts now too. Who have raised billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. They're in different areas of AI, different layers of the stack. We're going to talk about what's real and what's not. It's going to be really exciting. So in no particular order, I'm going to call up Daniela. And Aravind, could you come? And Shiv and Alex, please join us. OK, so you guys all know these companies. You know Scale, you know Anthropic, you know Perplexity. You probably know Abridge. If not, you should. It's our healthcare-focused company, which is as important as anything else. That said, we don't need you guys to kind of introduce your companies, which you've probably had to do in a lot of talks like this. So how about you have a room full of CEOs. How about you start out by just saying the one thing that when you are talking to peers who are not in AI is the thing you wish they knew better about either AI broadly or about your company. Just one thing that when you have all these people at once, it can save you time, glad handing later. So Shiv, we'll start with you. Give us one thing about either Abridge or the space you wish people knew better.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I would say is the word that I think about is like alchemy, like the amount of alchemy it takes to actually deliver and deploy and scale an enterprise-grade solution. And the ingredients that go in, not just computer science, not just the professors, the PhDs, the proprietary data, the models, but also the domain experts, like the people who are testing these things in the wild, the people who are giving us the feedback to be able to iterate and improve over time.
Awesome. And Daniela?
I think I would say, in terms of the industry in general, just how much road there is ahead of us. I know some of the numbers that were put up on the board earlier were extremely staggering, and I think sort of deserve to be a little pearl clutching when you look at them. But my perspective is that AI is advancing incredibly quickly, and also the process of industry really incorporating it into workflows. There's so much more work kind of ahead of us than behind us. I think about Anthropic in particular, the process of really taking these kind of lofty values around trust and ethics and security and safety and really productionizing them as we build them into our Claude models. I think just the amount of kind of technical expertise that is really required to do that is something that we really pride ourselves on, and is also something that takes just an incredible amount of experience to be able to do well.
By the way, I took down my name tag, but there's founder mode Alex and there's reporter mode Alex. So, yeah. And with that said, Alex, what about you?
Danielle and I were actually talking about this right before we came up, which is that the pace of progress of the core technology is incredibly rapid. I don't think you should not expect to see any real slowdown in the performance of these models. We were talking about how Claude Sonnet is a better programmer than many programmers who are out there right now. Like, it's a really incredible pace of technological progress, and that has very far-reaching implications. I think this is something that we all expect. And so, I think we're really in the deployment phase of the technology. It's all about how do we take this technology, these magical models, and really get them deployed everywhere in the economy as quickly as possible. And I think for Scale, the thing that we really focus on is, there's so much proprietary data out there. There's so much really special data that needs to somehow be blended into these models to create really differentiated capabilities and actually succeed in this deployment phase. So that's sort of where we spend our time.
Awesome. And Aravind, what about you?
Yeah, I would echo the points made here that it's still pretty early, and most people in the world are not even using these tools on a regular basis, leave daily basis, even a weekly basis. Most people are not even using these tools yet.
How many people use Perplexity or have recently? So,
this
room is probably the exception. Yeah.
San Francisco. I'm talking the world is pretty big.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So I think the potential is so big, but most people need to use it. It should feel so intuitive, and they're not really there to tinker around with models, but just like get their work done on a daily basis. And so our goal at Perplexity is like take all the amazing models that everybody else builds, like Anthropic and anybody else, and then try to like shape them into like really good consumer experiences. And then the particular focus area for us is to answer any question you have, and the selling point is like we try to do it in the fastest and most accurate way possible.
Got it. Now, you guys are all kind of in different points of the stack in some way, whether it's enterprise or consumer or infrastructure more to the application layer. Based on where each of you are, I'm curious if you think your area of this AI landscape is further ahead, like adoption and sort of real outcomes are more noticeable, or if you're maybe trailing, why would you think that is? But maybe like your view from the stack, how sort of you might think it's different from the, your peers on the panel. I think that would be really helpful for this group. So maybe Daniela, we'll start with you.
I think Anthropic is sort of an interesting example because we occupy multiple spaces that you're sort of gesturing at. I think for us, some of what we see is that the rate at which we can develop the technology is faster than the rate at which industry can absorb the new changes to AI. And this is a really interesting sort of spot to sit in as a business because we'll sort of come up with new research areas of interest. We'll kind of develop new features for the model. But the process, it's almost like you have to use both your hands at once, right? There's the process of sort of training the models, making them excellent, and then turning them into something that is usable in a very fast way by businesses. I think that's a completely different skill. And it is the case that while things are accelerating incredibly quickly on the business side, again, I still think there's so much more room ahead of us to be able to take these technologies and really deploy them at scale around the world over the next 2 to 5 years.
Alex, you obviously are working closely with companies like OpenAI, where they're, we hope, well-versed in all of this, but also government organizations. Do you see kind of a real spread in terms of sort of the adoption journey of the organizations you guys are working with, and sort of how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, similarly, we're the only company up here that really represents the infrastructure layer. So the sort of, the picks and shovels that power this incredible technology wave. Our data foundry powers most of the major models that people use every day. And I think that, as we've seen with NVIDIA, as well as with a lot of our growth, I think the infrastructure layer is clearly going to see many more years of growth, and it's going to continue growing exponentially, purely just because the sort of the technology is obviously so valuable and is like, as it gets better at the rate that we've sort of been talking about, it's going to obviously become more and more valuable. So the infrastructure layer, I think there's a very clear sort of investment thesis or very clear sort of continued growth trajectory. The application layer is interesting because we're really at the sort of very early days of the killer apps, so to speak, that will ultimately make their way across the economy. If you think about the internet, the Netscape days were many years before the killer or sort of like giant internet companies were ultimately built and deployed. So we're kind of in that phase where I don't, hopefully Perplexity will be one of them, but I don't think we know yet what the sort of like giant killer applications that are built on top of this technology look like. And this will be an exciting journey. I would say, you mentioned the government, and I think it's important to maybe say a little bit about that. I think that the unfortunate timing of the development of this technology is that it also is sort of coinciding with a period of dramatically increasing global instability. And these are, I think it's quite unfortunate these two mega trends are sort of like timed together, but I think that's the reality. And so broadly, globally speaking, we're seeing a huge increase in defense spending. This is kind of undeniable. And the history of defense is a history of what is the new technology that's going to allow you to outcompete your adversaries. At one point it was air. And the use of planes basically was like the major innovation. I'm from Los Alamos. The atomic bomb was definitely another one of these innovations. And I think the sort of the question upon which the entire sort of fate of the free world hangs upon is whether or not AI is that innovation for the modern era. I know that Anthropic and Scale, I think both of our companies spend a lot of time with governments to help them understand this, to ultimately help them hopefully get ahead of this big question. But I think that's the reality.
We've made it, I think, 10 minutes, and we're already at the is AI the next nuclear weapon question. Yes, making my job easy. In the healthcare world, I assume that people don't want a weapon, they don't want risk, they don't want things that they don't trust. So how have you found health partners who are willing to try out new tools in AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think any industry is adopting AI as quickly as healthcare is right now. We are announcing a new health system essentially every week at this point. We are live across the country, and I think it's pretty profound the way the industry has adopted this, and it's for a few different reasons. One reason is that 2 out of 5 doctors don't want to be doctors in the next 2 to 3 years. 27% of nurses in this country don't want to be nurses in the next 12 months. And so we sort of have this public health emergency where clinicians, there's nobody going to be left to deliver care in this country, and patients we're having to travel sometimes 4 or 5 hours from a outside the city sort of rural area into a inner city hospital in order to see the specialist that we need. And so we got to do something about it. And I think that had something to do with the industry really taking this technology up. A little bit of context on what we do. So we unburden clinicians from all the clerical work that crushes their souls at night. And so the idea is that they can just sort of focus on the patient in front of them and turn this technology on and sort of swivel their chair. And not only is their note there, but also their orders and their coding, all the other things can be sort of set on a table.
But do you solve for bad doctor handwriting? Not yet.
It's funny, I guess some of the most profound feedback we've gotten is from PCPs who tell us that for the first time in their 20, 30-year career, they're making eye contact with their patients and it's uncomfortable. But I think
Got it. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Perplexity being offered to me in the Uber app or via Lenny's newsletter. It feels like everywhere there are partnerships for Perplexity. I can't escape it. Is that the conscious strategy on the consumer side, or Aravind, what's the goal to kind of get out there that way?
I mean, if you ever try to raise money for building a search company, the first thing the investor would tell you, search is all about distribution. When I met my seed investor, Elad Gil, I mean, the first pitch was, I have an idea to disrupt Google. We're going to do search through glasses. And that way people don't have to type into the Google search bar. They're just going to ask stuff about whatever they see. And we'll get all the queries. It's going to work. And we're going to be the next Google. That was literally the naive pitch I gave. And he's like, yeah, all this is cool, but where are you going to get distribution? I think that there's also a often told story of how Sundar became the CEO of Google because, everybody focused on all the flashy projects. He just focused on getting Chrome to be the dominant browser, and that's why Google has the market share. So there's a reason we do all these partnerships. We're not doing it just because it's burn all the venture capital money to give away Pro.
Although we wouldn't feel sorry for the VCs. If
No. So we're tracking it pretty methodically. The thing is that the more people become aware of us, in future, say a friend tells you to go use this tool, it's much easier for you to go check it out. And it's worked out pretty well. We partner with a lot of telcos in different countries. LinkedIn and Uber partner with us. So actually, the best takeaway from that is a lot of people don't want the Google monopoly to continue. That's why they're working with us.
But one question I do have there is when we think about sort of translating what you guys are doing into real business outcomes, and you can all kind of answer this in your own way, but I'll start with Aravind. It does make me wonder, what is the intrinsic value of the product? What is the product worth if I can at least arbitrage off of these other services for a while to get it for free? And what is the real value there? And of course, I also have a vested interest because I work at Forbes. And my editors here, who you've tweeted with a bit in the past, Aravind, about how Perplexity might be using content from a place like Forbes or other media places. So where is the value capture to you? What is worth it, for the user and for maybe the content generator like me?
So the value of our product is in answering your questions on a daily basis, right? And sure, there are many other AI chatbots out there. There's a clear difference in Perplexity. We always pull relevant sources from the web, and we summarize from multiple sources together. And so that helps us to be a lot more accurate and have real-time knowledge of things. Even for things that happened in the past, like grounding in sources helps you to be pretty accurate as possible. And that's why people like using us, despite there existing like several other chatbots. I would say we're, our focus is on like growing the query volume. Entire year last year we did like 500 million queries. Now we're like pretty close to doing it on a monthly basis. If the growth trajectory keeps continuing, like we're going to get to a point where whatever was the query volume of Google at the time of its IPO is definitely like reachable for us. And we also want to monetize differently from other AI chatbots. We've come forth and said we're going to try advertising next quarter.
Yep.
And then you can ask me like, oh, you got all these users by claiming Google did ads and now you're going to do it too. But we're going to do it in a different way. We're not going to do sponsored links. We're trying to do different kind of ad units like sponsored questions or sponsored videos or images that go along with the answer. And I think like it's an experiment, right? Nobody's really trying out like other business models outside subscriptions and consumer. And our belief is that if that succeeds, we can compensate the content creators too by sharing the ad revenue on an answer where they were one of the sources. And that's why we started the publisher program. Forbes is welcome to join too.
Okay, I'm going to make you hug it out with my boss after the panel. So yeah, Daniela, with Claude and with sort of your business customers, where are you seeing people most willing to spend, and what do you think long-term the ecosystem does look like where people are willing to put real dollars to work here?
So I think it's funny when Alex says he's the deepest infrastructure layer, right? But I think of Claude and Anthropic as sort of the next layer really up the stack. What we specialize in, what we're sort of ultimately in the business of, is being a model company, right? We develop the actual models themselves. And what's been interesting to observe is the rate at which that sort of filters into major parts of the economy has varied a little bit based on industry, but is going very quickly. I think here we've already publicly shared about half of the Fortune 500 use Claude for some application today. There's a wide range of different applications that they use Claude for, but a few that are sort of in the lead as kind of most common use cases. One is coding. So anybody who has any developer that works for them can use Claude to both improve the quality of their code, increase the speed at which their developers are able to write and check their code. This is often the case with, you would imagine, industries you don't think of as sort of even very highly technical, but organizations that have big legacy code bases that perhaps they need to translate into a new language can use Claude to do that in a tiny fraction of the time that they would need to use a human to do that for, or humans to do that for. Additionally, we've seen that healthcare, speaking of Shiv's incredible work, is another area that is absolutely ripe for disruption from artificial intelligence. We hear the same exact type of stories as you. So many healthcare practitioners are exhausted and burned out from the amount of administrative work that is required from them every day. Claude is a great partner in being able to safely and securely summarize patient information that a doctor might write down in a note or might even say verbally, and be able to allow medical practitioners to actually spend time with their patients. Financial services is another area. You'll sense a theme here of highly regulated industries that are built on trust, where Claude can be an incredible partner and co-pilot in everything from financial analysis to analyzing market sentiment. And so I think what we have seen is a lot of the industries that you would actually think of as, people would say maybe they're slower to adopt new technology, have really been flocking to artificial intelligence because I think they see the potential power of these applications.
Okay, I'm going to ask one where maybe you guys will disagree. I hope so. I want to see some debate. I'm talking way too much. Shiv, do you think that inevitably the application layer is where a lot of adoption and spending will be over time in AI? And if so, what does that mean for your business? Because I feel like maybe, I don't know if you guys would end up the exception or not, that you're signing kind of top-down big enterprise contracts, but maybe the rest of the market becomes more like Perplexity, where we're signing up via Uber and it's more product-led growth. I'm curious kind of how you're thinking about the landscape.
Yeah, it might be related to interesting dynamics in healthcare as well. Like healthcare as an industry is not homogenous. On one end of the market, you have those really, really large health systems like Kaiser, like Mass General, like Hopkins, like UPMC. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you might have the doctor down the street who's taking cash out of pocket off the insurance grid. And then in the middle, there's like smaller provider groups. And what we've seen play out over these last couple years is that the barrier to entry into those large health systems is really high, actually. It's almost as high as it ever was before. The threshold for good enough is really high. Every doctor is an edge case assassinator. You get one thing wrong, you're dead to them forever. And then on the other side of the market, there's that doctor down the street. And I think for them, good enough, the bar is lower. They need some kind of relief, and the solutions that end up competing in that space, I think end up competing on very different sort of axes and sometimes on cost. But on that large health system end of the market, and I think it'd probably be a similar pattern in other vertical industries. For us, the challenge is we've got to work across all the different medical specialties. We've got to recognize from a speech recognition perspective all the symptoms, medications, diagnoses, procedures, and all the ways that doctors mispronounce medication names. We have to lean into that. And then beyond that, we have to create notes, for example, that a cardiologist like me is going to be good with, but also, radiation oncologist, also a hematologist, et cetera. So it's like we're on this treadmill we can never get off. And so for us, what the name of the game is more users, more data, more models that we can sort of orchestrate with larger models in a more complicated stack that end up integrating into existing systems, because nobody wants to exit their existing systems. They want this all to feel like good air conditioning, where it's set right, you're not even aware of it, things just sort of happen for you in the background. And so that's the sort of game for us, but I don't think that's the game for that other end of the market. And I think that's the end of the market where PLG is probably the way to go.
If I were to just interject to get at the core of your question, I think we're just so early in the AI industry where I think a lot of business models will work and a lot of different approaches to getting users, whether it's PLG or top-down enterprise or government sales or the model layer or the infrastructure layer. Like I think a lot of things will work because we're just at this very early phase. I think if we were to jump forward in a time machine 10 years, it's very obvious AI is going to be ubiquitous, and AI is very not ubiquitous today. And so almost everything will just see huge amounts of growth over that time period. And it's kind of interesting. The rest of tech, I think right now is in a pretty sort of late stage ecosystem position where a lot of tech is pretty stagnant. And so when you fund like a SaaS company, you really have to ask the questions, okay, what are the business dynamics here? How is it going to carve out a wedge? How is it going to like have a niche? Where's it going to grow from there? Like those are the very important questions for more mature tech categories. But AI is just very early, and there's a lot of things that are going to work. When I talked to Ben Horowitz about Netscape a few months ago, and one of the things he mentioned was like, yeah, we originally thought we were going to monetize with the browser, then Internet Explorer came and fucked us. And then we built a wholly new business, I think it was like servers or something, that ended up being way bigger than the browser business we had. And if that business got fucked, then we probably could build another big business. Like there's just like huge amounts of opportunity that is hard to think about because, again, we've been in such a relatively stagnant tech ecosystem for the past decade.
So Aravind, at Perplexity, how do you filter out people who are having like a new experience with the product versus that retention and sort of loyalty of customers? Because one thing I hear from some AI CEOs is like they can show their revenue growth is incredible. They can show a lot of top line excitement, but like they don't have cohorts of customers to really show. They can't prove that retention for a year or two is there because their products may not have been in the market for a year or two, right? So it's a little bit like, we think this is working. And so how do you sort of gauge that at Perplexity?
Yeah, so we track like two types of retention, the typical week by week cohorts, and like we try to make sure the asymptote is always, each succeeding week, the cohorts are like always moving up, and like that's always like a good trend, and so far it's been the case. We particularly track retention across like different demographics, people in the United States, which is our biggest market here. And even within the United States, we track like among schools, like what's the retention, because we think the next generation is less loyal to Google, so it's better to retain them even more. And then another metric which we take pretty seriously is like, if somebody has done at least like one query on Perplexity, are they at least doing another query in their lifetime? Like, let's say you use the product just once. Are you just literally off and you've never done another query? Then that's pretty bad for us. And initially we were like 80% of the users who tried at least one query did another query. I mean, I was like, we need to push this number as close to 100%. Because if this number is close to 100%, then we can try to focus on making sure people who did 2 queries do at least like 5 queries, and that becomes a habit. So like, I think this is that one metric every consumer company tries to nail, which is like, for Facebook, it was a number of friends you already had on the network that was a good predictor of whether you're going to stay. For Uber, it was like how many successful initial rides you had. And so for Perplexity, it's like number of queries that like were accurate enough in your first few attempts.
If people aren't loyal to Google, though, will they be? Do you think they'll be loyal to Perplexity?
I'm not saying they will be loyal to Perplexity if they're not loyal to Google, but at least the probability of them like becoming regular Perplexity users is higher if they are not loyal to Google.
Okay.
And there are 2 types of people who definitely fit in this category. One is people who are frustrated with Google for like lack of focus on a good experience for like so many years now, and the younger generation who are like not so used to like just typing into a search engine all the time.
Got it.
And that's like a pretty big population.
With Anthropic, it's interesting because you have Claude kind of consumer facing, but then you also have all these businesses using the API. Do you see different sort of stickiness or loyalty dynamics based on which end of the stack you're in, and how do you guys kind of try to build for both constituent bases?
So I think what is a little bit interesting about the different products that we develop is you would think consumer business so different in terms of the type of person that's fundamentally using the technology. But what we've seen is that I think in contrast to other consumer applications, most users of Claude, the consumer application, look like people in this room, right? They tend to be highly educated. They're using Claude for work-related tasks or intellectually related tasks, whether or not they are at work or at home. And so I think what's been really interesting for us to see is partly because of product decisions we've made, right? I sort of jokingly said once, we're not in the business of making snowboarding cat videos on Claude. It's very cool that companies can do that, but that is not what our user base is asking us for, right? They want to be able to use Claude to help them improve their writing, to analyze information, to look through legal documents, whether that's in their home life or their work life. And so a lot of what we've actually seen is that there's this very impressive sort of cross-pollination that happens for our users. So some folks will have a Claude AI account. They'll also use the API at their place of business, and they'll now use Claude for Work or Claude for Enterprise as well. And so really what I think we're sort of aiming towards is building tools that are useful for professionals, for people that need Claude to do intellectual, highly engaging work, because we ultimately believe that's going to be the direction that this technology continues to advance in.
But do you think that, are they finding that value right away? Do you have to lead them to it? Because one thing, I'm sure it's not cool anymore, but like early in my career, everyone talked about the Gartner hype cycle, the trough of disillusionment and all of that. I assume you guys have to, you debate with your teams or in some capacity or your VCs or whatever. Is this all up and to the right, or is it going to be a little bit more of a roller coaster where maybe a hospital says, well, this is great, but we actually want 10 other things that you can't do, so maybe it sucks, or why can't Claude do X, Y, and Z, et cetera? How do you kind of deliver that value or keep expectations in line with reality? And then I'd love Alex's take coming more from the infrastructure side, because I'm sure all your customers deal with this too. So.
I think this is a really great question and points to something very, very real, which is the difference between what AI technology can do today and what we expect it will be able to do in the future. And we really try to be as transparent as possible to say, the technological advancement could absolutely stop, right? And we try to be open and say, don't build for something that doesn't exist yet today in your business. That's just a recipe for disappointment. At the same time, we are simultaneously working with businesses to help them understand how can you realize actual value from this technology right now? Can you use Claude for customer support, for coding, for content generation, for summarization, for looking through unstructured data and helping to make it easier to parse, regardless of what industry you work in? But also, we try to give a window to our business customers into where we think the technology is going. What is it that our research teams are working on, and how do we expect that the future advancements will fundamentally be able to transform how these businesses work and operate? So there is a little bit of a balancing act there. Something we hear from customers all the time is, should I integrate Claude 3.5 or should I wait for Claude 4, right? What is it going to be able to do? And the reality is, businesses sometimes take a while to be able to understand the workflows that they need to use, to do the change management required to get people comfortable with using this technology. And so I do think there's a sort of real tension here that you're talking about around, do we build for today? Do we wait and build for tomorrow? Our recommendation really varies depending on what the use case and the business case is. And ultimately, I think part of the value we provide to customers is being that kind of consultant for them.
Obviously, like at the highest level, it's like, if you don't believe AI will transform businesses in 10 years, none of this matters to you. But if you do believe, then it's sort of like how much and in what ways. And so, Alex, when you're working with customers of different levels of sophistication or different points, how are you managing the expectation gap? And are there any blockers that you feel like are maybe keeping us from fully delivering on what people want?
So what I would say is I think both things are happening. There is some level of a real trough of disillusionment, but underneath that, there's this incredible exponential growth curve that is just going to keep going forward. And frankly, I think that the thing that's caused this disillusionment is, panels like this where people in the AI industry have gone up and sort of said, oh yeah, the AI will do everything for you, and it's sort of, the end of humanity's near. And I guess I kind of did that a little bit earlier, but I think that the AI industry itself has not done a great job of keeping expectations in check. Actually, Anthropic has done a pretty great job of this, but writ large, we have not done a great job of keeping expectations in check. But at the same time, the technology is really powerful. Lots of people are figuring out how to use it. And those use cases, whether it's in customer support, or it's in development, or it's in healthcare, or we work with a lot of there's a lot of government use cases for government efficiency. All of these use cases are very real. They clearly deliver a lot of clear ROI today, and you don't have to think too hard to think about what that value would be in the future. And so there's another sort of data point on this or illustration of this is I think when ChatGPT originally blew up, a lot of people would go around saying, oh, the retention curves suck, and this is just going to be a fad, and ChatGPT is eventually this is going to fall off a cliff. And here we are almost 2 years later. ChatGPT is continuing to grow pretty quickly. There's clearly a lot more monetization potential within that product, and I think the same is true within all of AI. So I think that when we engage with enterprises or government customers, I think we hold all this intention, kind of as Daniela's mentioned, which is, hey, this technology, you are likely to have out of step expectations about what AI can do for your business right now. That amazing use case, that incredible thing that you think is possible, it's probably not quite possible today. But I guarantee you there's 100 use cases, simple use cases that are going to easily create value today, and the technology is only improving. And I think, I was in DC last week and had a bunch of meetings with various government agencies, and this is obviously post the launch of O1, so they could all see what the pace of the technology was and how it was actually very quickly resolving a lot of their concerns. And then the excitement is very palpable. Oh, can I apply reasoning towards my unique problems and towards the sort of unique reasoning problems that I perceive that I have? This is all happening in real time. So I think that the trough is true. There's a lot of disillusioned people. There's also a lot of very exciting use cases.
Well, we would have loved to have OpenAI on the panel too, but there weren't any executives left to join us, so unfortunately. Aravind, when you're trying to take on Google search,
I see.
come on, I had to, guys. When you're trying to take on Google search, that's like a really lofty goal. That's a high win scenario to achieve against. Could set you up for maybe a little bit of disappointment to replace everything that they do for a user. Is there an incremental win for you, or sort of how do you manage expectations?
Yeah, so I guess like one thing to be very clear about here is we're not trying to take the navigational behavior away. Like I don't like first of all, you go to Google Trends and look at the top 25 words that are Googled like frequently. It's just literally single words like Amazon, Reddit, Netflix, Walmart, Costco, Instagram. Like the people are just trying to get to a particular website. We're not going after that use case. That's probably a billion searches a day by itself. Actually, Google's search traffic in the United States is sort of saturated. They're growing in the rest of the world. That's why, like, in order to get their ad revenue up in the US, they have to show more ads. Otherwise, there's no way the revenue goes up in the most highest GDP country. On the other hand, the consumer behavior of asking questions or like asking a search engine like detailed complex queries, that's just beginning to grow now. So all that traffic, we would love to be like majority player there. I'm sure Gemini will also compete for that, but it's pretty clear that like they're not going to be a monopoly there, right? And so we're not competing on the navigational query traffic, but we're definitely going to pretty big part of like being the best answer engine out there. And it's interesting that because of their existing business model of like making people click on links, they cannot just change core google.com. So that's like a very unique opportunity that has never presented itself before to like anyone who's tried to take on Google earlier. Earlier, whoever tried to take on Google would attack them on their privacy practices or their monopoly practices, or just like Google is evil sort of thing. And consumers didn't really get a pretty differentiated experience earlier. Now it's possible because these LLMs really started like working well on instruction tuning, conversations, everything like that, and like just being able to summarize really well without hallucinations. I think that sort of ability has been on the upward rise. So that's gave us like a pretty different opportunity to go after Google in a pretty different way that no one's attempted before. That said, like the lucrativeness of the business model is yet to be proven, so it's on us to actually do that too. Google is a legendary company, not just because this technology is amazing, but the AdWords business model is amazing too. So we need to do something else.
We have their competitors in the room, and then Daniela is backed by Google, so her poker face has been very good throughout that answer. That does make me think, though, we have Andy Jassy speaking in a bit. We're here with friends from Salesforce, some of the big cloud companies here. This is the 9th year of this event. When we started, one of the big debates was, will the hyperscalers dominate the cloud industry? Will there be these big $100 billion businesses that can hold their own alongside these big cloud companies? Obviously, that has happened, and the hyperscalers are still very important today. In your world, how is that playing out? Do you think that we will see long-term public AI companies that slot in alongside Andy and some of the other big hyperscalers? I'll start with you, Shiv.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely see that happening. I think the trust was a theme that came up earlier today. And I think one of the challenges that we've had, and I think we've performed well against, is like how quickly can you build trust? Like healthcare only moves at the speed of trust, and for us, it's been some combination of like transparency, reliability, and credibility. So like leaning in to like, this is how well it's doing today, but this is how well we think it's going to do tomorrow, and this is how we're going to measure ourselves. Just today, we announced a research collaborative with some of the top health systems in the country called Abridge Research Collaborative, ARC, and now we're just going to be publishing these RCTs, these randomized control trials across the country on how well this tech is actually performing in the wild. And I think that's one of the hardest things for a young company to try to pull off. But I think, at least in the enterprise world, I think it's an important ingredient if you're shooting for that kind of a goal.
Anyone else have thoughts there?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is the option? Like,
Yeah.
you got to go public, or you got to sell your company. That's a long-term, asymptotic like future, right? So, I mean, to go public, you have to be profitable, or you have to like be on the path to profitability. and you have to have like a business model that can keep growing as your whatever user traction keeps improving. And it's amazing if like you don't have to keep pumping a lot of sales like motions into it. That way the margins are higher. So that's what we're trying to do. Like if it is the case that people's daily habits change and people ask a lot of questions, on an average our users ask like at least 7 questions a day, whoever is using it pretty actively. So if that's like a thing that spreads to like a big chunk of the world, not just the tech crowd, certainly like, and if you figure out a way to monetize like a good chunk of those queries, I can totally see this like being like a public company. And the other thing that is in our favor is the competition between the model builders is going to keep the prices going down. And then open source is also like progressing pretty well. So like that ensures that like the cost of operating this product is also continually going to drop. So as we scale up, we're also benefiting from lower cost per query, and the capabilities are also like getting better and better, right? And then like that's amazing for an application layer company to sit on top. And you asked the question earlier about like, is it all going to be at the application layer or the model layer? I mean, long term, it's very, very clear that like there's a saying like, content is king, but distribution is God. Like you got to like really own the users, you got to own the customers. And so I believe if you succeed at providing a pretty good product and can benefit from all the other advances that are happening at the infrastructure layer, you're well set up. Like all you have to do is make sure you have a profitable business model.
Will scale also, do you think, hold its own in the long run, stay independent? Obviously, there's no M&A happening anyway, but.
Yeah, no, I think we can grow for a very, very long time. I mean, ultimately that is, as Aravind was getting at, the difference between whether or not you become a $1 trillion company or, you fall off before then is, do you have the ability to just compound over an extremely long period of time? And I think that's very possible with AI, so.
I feel like Anthropic's already well on its way there. No one could afford you guys anyway, so. Cool. Well, we could talk all day, but thank you for these insights. We really appreciate it. You guys were all really good sports. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.